Hi, everyone. Today on the Writing Gym podcast, we're talking about audiobooks with Richard Rieman. You're going to walk away with specific tips on how to make your own audiobook and what that process is like.
Hi, I'm Andy.
Don't forget to download the free cheat sheet, How to Succeed in Audiobooks, at www.writing-gym.com/audiobooks to help you get the most out of the episode and apply the information to your writing piece.
You could write freely and achieve your publishing dreams. You're tired of rejection and lying awake till 2 a.m. wondering how you could have fixed your manuscript. Wallowing in self-doubt is not getting you closer to your writing goals. You need real standards, real support, and real change. Are you ready to transform your writing and take it from the slush pile to publishable? We are currently accepting select writers in the Writing Gym. If you'd like to see if you're the right fit for this accelerated program, you can talk with Annalisa directly. That's right. She's currently booking calls to talk to you about your manuscript, where you are, where you'd like to go, and how you can get there. Spots are limited, so please sign up now at www.datewiththemuse.com/book-a-call. We'll place a link in the show notes for you. And now I'd like to introduce you to our resident writing coach, the gal who helps you pump your writing into shape in the Writing Gym. Welcome back to the Writing Gym podcast, Annalisa Parent.
Well, thank you, Andy. It's a pleasure to be here with you again.
And this week, I have a fun little story about Annalisa to share. She was actually a finalist in her spelling bees at her school all throughout her middle school years.
It's true, but I played second fiddle to my younger brother. He was a state finalist, so we're really proud of him.
So share with us in our Facebook group, what words do you hate spelling? And also make sure and tell us all about it on the contact form at www.datewiththemuse.com. And now to introduce you to our fabulous guest this week. Richard Rieman is a storyteller with a rich, warm voice and a background in acting, voice acting, and improv. In just 4 years, Richard has narrated and produced over 100 audiobooks through Audible and other distributors. He won 3 2016 EVVY Audiobook Awards from CIPA, the Colorado Independent Publishers Association, and is an Audible-approved producer. Richard used his reporting background to interview top audiobook narrators for his book, The Author's Guide to Audiobook Creation, 2016 Gold Medal winner in Writing Publishing in the Gold eBook Awards. Richard credits reading to his children in his wizard and monster voices for putting him on the path to audiobook success. Thank you so much for joining us today, Richard.
Thank you, Andy and Annalisa. It's great to be here. My claim to fame in grammar school was getting kicked out of the altar boys for laughing in church. Not my fault. A kid spit a host out in front of me, so that's why I got kicked out of the altar boys.
It sounds like you were having a lot more fun than I was. Memorizing 5-syllable words.
Right.
And having just come from Colorado all the way across the country to Vermont, I know that out in Colorado they like to say those acronyms as names. So those are the EVVY Awards,
right.
And SIPA is the Colorado Independent Publishing Association, which is a great organization. And it was a pleasure to participate in that while I was out there, and it was a pleasure to meet you while I was out there, Richard. I can't wait till I'm back again.
Well, it was great meeting you too. Denver is kind of a hotbed for authors and for audiobook narrators these days. So it's part of the golden age of audiobooks that we're talking about today.
I love that. So tell us a little bit more about what you do with and for authors, Richard.
Well, I started out as just an audiobook narrator through Audible and Audible's ACX, Audiobook Creation Exchange division, where you can do auditions for authors and get work that way. But I decided to actually meet authors, real life authors in person, and joined every meetup group, every author organization in Colorado that I could, and got into producing authors doing their own books in a recording studio where I direct them, as well as being a consultant for them, where I find the right narrator for them, if it's not me, for the job, and walk them through the entire process, because authors are busy people and they don't want to have to learn a whole new process for creating an audiobook.
Yeah, and if I understand correctly from our conversation at the SEPA picnic earlier this year, we were talking about some of the professional actors who you have drawing people even from LA to help with the work that you're doing.
Yes, Mara Pearl, who is an author, a narrator, and used to be an actress on Days of Our Lives. I work closely with Mara in producing audiobooks through her studio also in Los Angeles.
That's really wonderful. And so does this cross genres? Are you working in fiction, nonfiction, women's fiction, children's fiction? What does that look like as far as the genres you're dealing with?
Yes, absolutely, across all genres. I've been most successful with the horror stories. Yeah, I don't know why. It's the monster voice, or the wizard voice that I learned to do by watching Harry Potter. Yeah. And you can take the same voice and do a children's book. Mm-hmm. Once upon a time, there was a fairy who had but one tooth, and take that same voice and do a horror. I'm Dr. Walter Freeman. I do transorbital lobotomies with an ice pick and a hammer, but don't worry, it doesn't hurt hardly at all. And those are the types of books that I've done. And across all genres, because I find the right narrator to fit a particular genre. And right now, the hottest thing is young adult. What's going on in the industry is that people at that age, 18 to 24, listen to podcasts, and they're plugged in, the earbuds all day, and they think audiobooks are just long podcasts. So to them, audiobooks are kind of interesting. And so there's a big boom in the young adult genre in audiobooks these days.
Oh, I love that. And, hearing you do some of those voices, Richard, makes me want to just write a fairy tale or a horror story just so that I can listen to you read it.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I've been a cowboy. I've been a pirate. I've been all sorts of things in books. And, how much fun is being able to act in audiobooks where I can do 30 different characters. And I have done that in just one book. Whereas if I was a stage actor, you do one role unless you're, doing a production with yourself doing many characters. So it's great. Yeah, I love audiobooks. And really, I wasn't kidding. This is the golden age of audiobooks. We just had a report come out today that sales are up 28.8% in the first quarter of this year in audiobooks. They have gone up over 20% a year for the past 3 years. It's the fastest growing thing in publishing right now.
That's amazing. And, are there people who are jumping straight into just creating an audiobook without even bothering with print or ebook? Or do most go through the print hoop first?
Most go through the ebook or print book version first and have the story ready to go and translate into audio. In fact, with Amazon's ACX, and Amazon owns both ACX and Audible, because they are the 800-pound gorilla. With them, you actually have to have either an ebook or a print book, at least in your pre-sale status, before you can create the audiobook version. You can go to publishers outside of Amazon and ACX and publish without an accompanying book, but you should have both because they work together. You're out there promoting every form of your book.
Absolutely. Now, this is just kind of a personal question, and this goes back to listening to the Harry Potter narration, which I regret that I've forgotten that actor's name. But
Jim Dale, yes.
Jim Dale.
Yeah.
There's just a variety of voices that he brought to that reading. And I've always wondered this. This is like a behind the scenes question. You know, are you reading all of those voices at once? And does it ever happen that you're like, dang it, that was the witch? Or that you get confused?
All the time. I will have characters, the judge saying to the lawyer, I didn't think you were correct in saying that. Well, I thought you were, and just going back and forth. We're doing it live, if you will. And, if we make a mistake, we stop and start over again. And there's a couple different methods for doing that. One is punch and roll, where you go back and play the last few seconds of the audio and just pick it up again. Or some people use a dog clicker when they make a mistake and just go click, click. And that way, when they edit, they can see where the mistakes were made.
Right. And then, I find when I'm writing, it's very fluent for me. But then when I try to read what I've written, and I've got lots of experience in radio and lots of experience on the stage and film. But when I try to read my own writing,
I know.
How do you coach writers through that, or how do you get through that yourself?
Well, my recommendation is, unless you have public speaking, radio, acting background, you really want to get a professional to be the voice of your book. It's a lot more difficult than you think, because it's so much more than reading out loud. Even with nonfiction, there is a way of speaking, a way of communicating one-to-one. You're talking to one person at a time, usually listening to an audiobook, and you really have to master that approach, even in nonfiction, because somebody's listening to you literally for hours. Mm-hmm. So not only must you have a nice voice, that helps, but also the acting ability, so that you can draw people into the story, make them interested in what you're saying.
Absolutely. And, there are a lot of free audiobook sites out there where people kind of try their hand at practicing. Do you encourage people to practice in that way beforehand and kind of get some experience?
Well, I encourage people to, as my friend Sean Pratt, who has done over 180 audiobooks himself, says, go into a closet and close the door and basically have a little light there and read your book out loud into your phone or recorder for at least 2 hours, and then play it back and see if you really want to be an audiobook narrator. Give you that experience. But seriously, if you are interested in learning about audiobook narration, acx.com is a great place to go. For their what they call producers, narrators section. They have lots of tips on proper equipment, how to get proper acoustics, how to get training, which is always great when you're starting out, to get a voice acting coach, an audiobook coach, if that's what you're going to specialize in.
Now, and so is that something that you work with authors on to coach them through that, or are you working primarily with people who want to hire actors to read their books for them?
I work primarily with authors rather than working with narrators or even studios. And, I have a studio relationship here in Denver with Postmodern Studios, and I bring the authors in and set them up with everything they need. We have an engineer, and just like in the major studios in Los Angeles and New York, we let them tell their story out loud. Of course, I give them tips, about what to eat, not to eat before you're, so you don't have stomach rumbles underneath your entire recording, which we did with one author. We heard some smacking noises going on with this one author, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And she said, "Should I take my gum out?"
Oh, goodness gracious.
You're like, yeah, that's a good idea, actually. So yeah, we work with authors to and as I mentioned, get them to talk one-to-one, to really, not just read out loud, to really communicate. And if they can do that, it's their words, they've written it, they know how each sentence should be said, because nothing drives authors crazier than hearing a narrator take their work and, not pronounce it the same way, not emphasize it the same way, because every sentence can be, pronounced or emphasized, and you can say, I went to the store. I went to the store. I went to the store. You can really do it so many different ways. When it's the author who has written the words and giving it their own voice, usually they know exactly, what they wanted it to sound like. But you have to give up your baby sometimes. If you're giving it to a narrator, it's their interpretation of your words, especially with fiction. And, it's like a movie being made of your book. It's going to be a lot different than what you wrote in your mind.
Absolutely. And so walk us through the process, Richard. So, author calls you on the phone and says, hey, Richard, I want to do an audiobook. What happens next? What's the process?
Well, prices are set by the length of the audiobook. And what I do is I have a pricing structure by per 1,000 words, 1,000 words. It can be anywhere between $10 per 1,000 words and $30 per 1,000 words, based on the process, how long the book is, how complicated it is. So bottom line is, I see the length by the number of words. I can give the authors an estimate about how long the book will be, how the cost would be. There are several options. I could narrate it. I could find a narrator. I can go find a narrator on acx.com who will split the royalties with you. That means no money up front, other than I do have a consulting fee. No money up front. You split with your producer / narrator the cost of that book. And most narrators who take royalty share deals are either a little less experienced, or they see you've got a really good selling book, and so they want to jump on board and be your partner in the project. But it's not as expensive as most people think. You can get an audiobook produced for $500, $600. Up to $3,000 is usually the most expensive ones that we've produced. So it's not quite as expensive. And with audiobooks, the price they sell for is much closer to your paperback or hardcover than it is to your ebook. So you get more money per sale. 80% of the authors that I worked with last year made more money from their audiobook versions than they did from their ebooks. Because with ebooks, there are a lot of free giveaways. The price is low. So it's not, even though you may sell a lot of books, it's not as lucrative as just selling a small number of audiobooks.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're inspiring me, Richard. I think all of our listeners know at this point that I've got a book coming out this year, Storytelling for Pantsers. And I would love to have an audio book. So let's talk about that once we're off the record.
Okay. Yeah, and you can do an audiobook from home. I don't recommend it because you don't have a professional recording studio. But you can get a decent microphone, many of the ones used in podcasts, for instance, and be in a quiet room, especially like a walk-in closet with clothing that is a good acoustic environment. A lot of narrators start out that way, and you do have to have a recording, way to record it on your laptop. But can you do it? Yes. You will need professional editing help, though. It'll cost you $70 per finished hour is the way they usually price it for editors, to edit out the mistakes and get the levels right and have the right amount of room tone at the beginning and end of each chapter, mastering the recording. So you will need some professional help. Most of us do. But it's always good to work with a professional editor if you're going to record it yourself at home. It can be done. I had one marketing author who sold 900 copies of her first audiobook in the first 3 months that it was out there, and she recorded it at home.
Wow. I have a question. Because I enjoy writing fantasy literature, and I know that, when you create a world like that, there are very specific things that have to be said in a very particular manner. How do you sit down with an author and go through each and every individual word that you're not sure about that they've created for their book?
Well, we call it book prep. First thing narrators do will be to read the entire book and take notes. They want every character pronunciation. That's the first step, to make sure the characters are all pronounced correctly. And what I do is, you can do it as basic as having people call me and leave me a voicemail with the proper pronunciations, or create an audio file if they know how to do that. The second thing is any difficult terms, if the author already knows which ones they are, that's great to have a little cheat sheet built up. Otherwise, it's up to the narrator. A good narrator will take notes and say, how do you say this before they start recording the audiobook. And if they get it wrong, you always have the opportunity, before you finally approve the audiobook, to go at Chapter 6 at 3 minutes and 13 seconds in. You said this word and the proper pronunciation is that. And your narrator will go back and edit it to make sure it's correct.
Wow. That's great. So can you tell us, Richard, a favorite anecdote or a favorite character in all of your adventures in creating these audiobooks?
Well, I've already given you one, which is Dr. Riemann, the crazy psychiatrist in the 50s who did lobotomies, based on a real story too, a true story. And I love children's books. The Toothless Fairy was one I did, and one I got to be a 9-year-old boy lost in a haunted furniture store. Did that chair just talk to me? So it is so much fun to do, the children's book genres. And if you have a children's book, it's important to know you can attach a PDF to anybody who downloads the audiobook can get a free PDF of the images in the book. Or you can simply tell them to go to your website and have a special section for people who buy the audiobook to also get the images. And that way they can play it for their kids and also show them the characters. So that's another way to bring children's books to life.
That's really amazing. I love that. So, if you're mingling at one of these author events and someone says, all right, so why should I have an audiobook? How would you answer that question?
I would say that an audiobook gives you new fans and new listeners of all of your books. And they are, adding on to people in your genre who love books in your genre. And also, it's so much easier to find an audiobook in your genre than it is to find a book. On Amazon, there are, I believe it was 540,000 Westerns. And I looked it up for audiobooks, and there were 14,000 audiobooks that were Westerns. So if you have a fan, are they going to find your book or your audiobook of that genre? So it's a great way to find new followers and committed followers, because audiobook people, once they find an author they like, they'll buy everything.
Well, and that's true for readers as well. I find that, obviously I have my favorite authors who I go to again and again. But when you find someone whose style you really enjoy in an audiobook, I feel like I could follow those particular voices anywhere that they want to take me.
And the technology is headed right in the direction of audiobooks, because you can listen to an audiobook on your phone. You can listen to an audiobook in your car with, the apps like the Audible and iTunes apps. You can listen on your Amazon Echo device. 16% of people are now listening on Echoes to audiobooks. So it's amazing where the technology is going.
Well, you're really encouraging me. This is my next step. Stay posted. Stay tuned, listeners. We're going to have an audiobook of Storytelling for Pantsers any day now.
I find it funny. It kills me that people are listening to it on their Amazon Echoes, because I think back to the time when there would be radio programs. Mm-hmm. And, families would gather around to listen to a radio program, and, before there was television. And I feel like, it feels like this, antiquated thing from years past, but at the same time, it's so very exciting that it's a new way to share all these fantastic books that people are writing, that you can sit down with your family and, share an entire book together rather than watching a movie or, some other form of entertainment.
I know. Annalisa mentioned the Harry Potter series with Jim Dale. I mean, you can basically be in your living room and listen to the entire series, and it's different than reading the book. It's different than watching the movies. It is a completely different type of experience, but you're visiting the same characters that you know in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, as an author, thinking about, what was J.K. Rowling's experience listening to that audiobook? And of course, we can only speculate. But, if it were me, I can imagine kind of feeling like, oh my goodness, I created this. And this reading just really brings this to life and is so just not, I don't want to say better, but just adds an extra level to this thing that I've created.
I know. I stole my wizard voice from Harry Potter, going into the wand shop. Harry, so good to see you, Harry. I gave your parents their wands. So, basically, I love the Harry Potter audiobooks too, and I steal freely from the characters.
So we ask one question of all of our guests, Richard, and that is, if you could give one piece of advice to aspiring authors, what would it be?
Write music, not just words. Every sentence you write, read out loud to yourself, and realize that if you write all short sentences, all 5-word sentences, it'll sound staccato. If you write all very long sentences, it's going to get boring. You have to have that mix, a tempo, if you will, to find the music in the writing. And that comes out in the version that you're talking out loud, speaking out loud, and also in the audiobook.
Oh, that is so beautiful, Richard. I'm so glad you said that, because that's something that I've talked to writers about so many times, because there are moments when short sentences really work if you're trying to get the tension, right? And there are moments when you want those long, lyrical, beautiful Dickensian sentences. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, if you don't on every page have a variance of sentence types, your reader's going to close that book. Your reader's going to stop listening to the audiobook. So thank you for saying that, because it's so true. And I'm sure, on your side of the desk as the person who's reading that and thinking about what it sounds like, that's especially relevant for you. And, not all authors think of what their words are going to sound like. But even if we think about our experience as a reader reading a book, there's a part of us that's kind of hearing it at the same time that we're reading it. So that's so, so, so important.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Richard. It's been so exciting to hear about this completely new part of the writing world. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's great being here with you guys.
And for our listeners, you can find links to Richard's website in the show notes at www.writing-gin.com/audiobook. Thank you, Annalisa, for more of your fantastic writing advice. Annalisa is the resident writing coach in the Writing Gym. She helps writers to find the confidence and expertise to bring their novels from idea to publishable. And she's pretty much the most fantastic at what she does. You know, you could publish if you only knew how. Richard has given us some great tips today, but look, if you love the Writing Gym podcast and if you find these tips valuable, think of how much faster your writing will get pumped into publishing shape in the Writing Gym. Remember to book your call with Annalisa today at www.datewiththemuse.com/book-a-call. It will be the best 45 minutes you invest on your writing career this year. The Writing Gym even has a personal trainer, me, to help keep you accountable to your writing goals. You know how you always say, I love to write, but I just can't find the time. Well, what would it be like to have a gentle guide, someone to check in with you on how you're doing on your weekly writing goals? Well, you can. You can get the accountability you need to make the time for writing in the Writing Gym. If you're serious about pumping your writing into publishing shape, apply now. Book your call with Annalisa today at www.datewiththemuse.com/book-a-call. Thank you so much for joining us to pump up your writing here on the Writing Gym podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes and download the free cheat sheet on how to improve your writing at www.writing-gym.com/audiobook. Happy writing!
This has been the Writing Gym podcast with Andy Brixey and Annalisa Parent. To join the Writing Gym, visit www.writing-gym.com.